Okay, so on this one, they're telling us find the domain. So whenever you see domain, then you think, okay, what is allowed? What x's are allowed, or what x values are allowed? Okay, well, we already know. So look in here. Here's the notes. This is the exam one notes again. And what does it say? It says, first off, there's two steps. So step one, denominators cannot be zero. So let's do that. So step number one, denominators cannot equal zero. That's a big no-no. So we go, all right, grab the denominator, bring it over here. X minus 3 cannot be zero. Okay, add 3. So far, this is pretty simple. So x cannot be 3. Okay, that's part of the story. That's the first part of the story. X cannot be 3, but that's not the whole story. Step 2. The inside of square roots must be greater than or equal to 0. The inside of square roots. Why? Why? Because you can't take the square root of a negative number. Remember, that's imaginary. Let me remind you. Square root of 9 is 3. You all know that, right? And why? Why is the square root of 9 3? Because 3 times 3 is 9, right? If a young child was to ask you, why is the square root of 9 3? You would say, don't bother me, kid. Just do what I say. No, maybe hopefully you'd say 3 times 3 is 9, right? That's correct. That's the reason. Now, by the same thought, what's the square root of 9? You cannot do it, right? Because it's not negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 would be positive 9, not negative 9, huh? So my point is, you can't have a negative in the square root. You can try it on your calculator, give you an error. So we cannot have the inside of a square root be negative. Instead, the inside must be 0 or bigger. Is that making sense so far? Right? Domain is all about what's allowed and what's not allowed. Like, you're not allowed to put metal in your microwave unless you want to wreck it, or knives in the toaster, right? So we're talking about domain is what's allowed. We can't make the bottom of the fraction 0. We already dealt with that. And now we're talking about roots. There's certain things you can't do with roots. What? You can't make the inside negative, because square root of a negative is imaginary. It's not real. What do you do then? Instead, the inside must be 0 or bigger, which means what? Inside must be greater than or equal to 0. You tracking with me? That's what I'm saying down here in the notes. You got to take inside of the root greater than or equal to 0. Inside greater than or equal to 0, and then solve. Because the inside can't be negative. And not negative means greater than 0 or equal to 0, right? 0 or bigger. So then I just grab the inside. Now, what's the inside of the root? It's right. It's right here. This is the inside of the root. So bring it on down here and say, oh, it's x plus 3. So not the root itself, mind you, but just the inside. You tracking with me? I'm just saying the inside. I don't grab the root itself, just the inside of the root. The root's not a problem, just the inside can't be negative. The inside must be 0 or bigger. So I grab the inside and then I solve for x. So what do? Well, subtract 3 from both sides, right? So then that's going to be, cancel, x greater than or equal to negative 3. So that's the other part of the story. So we have two parts, that part and that part. You're tracking with me. X has to be not equal to 3 because that would make the bottom 0. We can't have that. That's infinity. And x has to be greater than or equal to negative 3 in order that, because the inside of the square root can't be negative. Well, how do you put those together? Well, you go to a number line. What you need to do, and I might say this, yeah, Putting, yes, so it's here I'm explaining, putting these together, blah, 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 number line. So I'm gonna do that right now for you. So let's do it. So let's put these guys together on a number line. Here we go. These two conditions. Let's do this one first off. X greater than or equal to -3. So here's -3, and we're talking about everything greater than. But that's greater stuff is to the right, isn't it? These are all the values greater than, or it's all the numbers -3 or bigger, right? Like -2 and -1 and 0 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 on to infinity. You tracking with me? So far, so good? Now, what about this part though? X cannot be 3. So we go, oh, okay. Oh, and by the way, usually we do this with a solid dot, on the number line. Solid dot, but bracket is the same thing. I'll do a bracket, same thing. And then we're going to have an open dot at 3. An open dot, which means we can't, why is that? Because X cannot be 3. X cannot be +3. You tracking with me? X has got to be bigger than -3, but got to have a hole here. It can't be +3. And how do we make a hole in set notation? Well, what you do is you do a parenthesis this way and a parenthesis that way. What do you mean? What does that do? That means, remember, parentheses do not include the number. Parentheses, whenever you put a parenthesis next to anything, it means you're around it. You're close to it, but you're not straight on it. So notice we're not straight. Oops. We're not, I'll just say right. We're not right on the +3. So in other words, our answer is -3 to 3 united with, because there's this whole section, which is right there. That's all the numbers between -3 and +3. And then this section, which is all the numbers from 3 to infinity. That's our final answer, which is up here, right here. I know that's confusing. Does that make sense? Because we have 2 intervals there at the end. We have all, we're saying, just imagine, how would you say it in words? You would say all the numbers from -3 up to +3, but don't include the +3. Parenthesis there, right? Bracket on the -3. Remember, bracket includes it. Why do we include it? Well, because it can be greater than or equal. You can be equal to -3. You can be straight on -3. That's fine. Or greater, or to the right. But you can't be right on 3.
I see.
Because that was our first condition. X cannot be 3. So all the numbers from -3 up to 3, and then from 3 the rest of the way, 3 to infinity. Parenthesis on both those 3's, bracket on the -3, because we include the -3 and we don't include the +3. There we go.